Module 7 is about high-performance teams. Part 1 is the introduction to high-performance teams and the high-performance team meeting model. I'd like to spend a little time going over the outline for Module 7 to provide some context. Part 1 is going to be some introductory material about teams and some of their historical problems. Also going to introduce the high-performance team model. But then in parts 2, 3, 4, and 5, that's where we're going to discuss the high-performance team model. I ran across it about 15 years ago during some consulting work with the management team for a medium-sized company. And I was really taken back by how effective this management team was. I was sitting in on their management meetings every 2 weeks to coach them on quality issues. So I was able to find out more about the model. And for the last 15 years, I've been using it and teaching it with some success. So I'd like to introduce that to you in Module 7. Hope you'll find it valuable. And even though you may have a lot of experience with teams and teamwork and meetings, perhaps there'll be some stuff here that you'll find new and useful and somewhat compelling. Part 6, I've included another look at PERT CPM, that's the Program Evaluation and Review Technique, and the Critical Path Method, because if we're talking about a project team, like a Six Sigma project team, and if you have a deadline for completion, it would be nice to have this project management tool explained in a little more depth. Module 7 is based on years of experience and research on transformational change, leadership, and teamwork. We're going to look at teamwork as having 3 phases. The first phase is the setup and initiation of the team and getting the meetings organized. Phase 2 has to do with what goes on in the meetings. And Phase 3 has to do with what goes on after you walk out of the meeting and before the next meeting. I believe that you can be successful in 2 of these 3 and totally fail because you don't have all 3. It's real important that all 3 of these phases of teamwork be done properly if you want to have a highly effective team. If you don't, then you either have a mediocre team or a poor performing team. So we're going to introduce the high performance team model in the context of these 3 phases. Also, what we're basing this on is the assumption that we're dealing with self-directed work teams, and probably the context is projects, but it could be committee work or an ongoing committee that could benefit from this material. Let me just add at the beginning that we're going to be teaching the high performance team meeting format, and it's going to be shown with all of its features. But understand that you can modify it, remove some of the features for either a Six Sigma team or some other application. You need to structure it to fit the particular task at hand. And I say this because this is what I've done over the years, is modify it depending on the type of project or type of team or meeting that's going to be taking place. But it really does help lead effective meetings, and I know from reports that I've gotten that it builds stronger teams as well. I remember one time on a project I asked for some feedback after it was all done. One particular team I was interested in because their project was the best of all that were done. They reported that the high performance team model was why they had done things so effectively. But the added comment that kind of struck me was they said, and they also believed that they would probably be lifelong friends because of the bonding they had during the course of the project. So I thought that was kind of interesting. By now, I suppose some people are getting used to seeing this slide from time to time, or ones just like it, but I wanted to put it in again because in the transformational leadership model shown at the bottom, a leader or a manager is not going to be successful in this context unless they're able to put together and manage successful teams. They need to have teams working for them that are effective and efficient. They're improving systems. They're innovative and creative and high functioning. So being good at setting up teams and making sure that the teams are productive is a major role for a leader. I just want to reinforce that having the proper culture is a prerequisite for a team being successful. A team needs the transformational organizational values of team and group success being highly desired, and that teamwork and team leadership are qualities that are going to help someone get ahead, and not just a reliance on individual performance. So I couldn't move on without bringing this up again. Let me just say that if you happen to be a manager that has some control over the merit pay program or how merit pay is handed out, you might want to take a look to see if it's based on individual performance or if it is geared toward team contributions and group goals. Otherwise, if it's too centered on individual performance, it may be counterproductive in trying to get people to cooperate with their peers or to communicate with them with a lot of trust and sharing. So that's just something else that I wanted to add at this point. A useful activity when forming a team is to ask them to discuss the 5 dysfunctions of a team. This is from a book by Patrick Lencioni. The first dysfunction is the absence of trust. The absence of trust comes from an unwillingness for people to be a little bit vulnerable to each other, so they're not willing to openly share. The second is the fear of conflict. This comes from the lack of trust, but people don't feel willing to discuss things openly and get into passionate debate where you really can bring out issues and get to the core of what it is that you're trying to do. The fear of conflict leads to the third dysfunction, which is a lack of buy-in. People that are afraid to get engaged also find that they're never willing to buy in or get committed. And because they're not committed, that leads to the fourth dysfunction. That's avoidance of accountability. Since they don't lack any commitment, they don't really see a need to be engaged, and they avoid accountability. They're not really interested. And finally, that leads to the fifth dysfunction. If someone doesn't really care about being accountable, then they're really not that concerned about the results. Really what they're doing is they're regressing into their individual needs and whatever their goals are above the collective goals of the team. So in summary, the 5 dysfunctions typify the problems that a team can experience in a transactional culture. So transitioning to a transformational culture helps eliminate these dysfunctions to a certain degree. Now I'd like to introduce the high-performance team model. First of all, let me say that I believe that professionals really appreciate a well-run, productive meeting and being part of something useful. And I found that to be true because I've had people tell me that. The high-performance team model is geared toward making that happen. So it provides a structure that can work in almost any work culture. It's designed to do that. It greatly reduces the people problems that you can have at meetings. Because the meetings are so good, it improves attendance and productivity. The team is, as a group, geared toward professional growth, and it's built in to the model. You're achieving objectives and you're improving interest and cooperation. At this point in the introduction, I want to point out that there are different types of teams. There are design teams that could be involved with designing a product or a process. There are process improvement or process control teams. They can be involved with identifying problems, diagnosing problems, or solving them, or all three of those. Or there could be variation reduction teams, where the heavy use of statistical methods might be involved to try and gather data and analyze variation. It's important to step back and ask ourselves, which kind of team are we trying to put together, so that we can seek the right skill sets and the right qualifications of individuals and make sure that we're putting together a team that has a chance to be successful based on the kind of objective that it has. There are several ways that a team can be organized. There's the leader-led versus the self-directed work team. In the leader-led team, there's either an appointed or elected leader, and then they remain the leader throughout the project. And in that case, there's a certain set of dynamics. The self-directed work team usually has rotating roles so that people fill different shoes, and they have to be able to adapt to whatever role that they're taking on. Now let me say that there isn't really one model here, one of these two, that's greatly superior to the other. They both work, and they both should be available for a manager to use depending on what they think is going to work best. But let me just say that in the self-directed work team, because people rotate different duties, sometimes they appreciate what other people are going through a little bit more, and that may be an edge under some circumstances.